and so forth. And the irony of that school, which had played a real role or plays a real role in American academics and in Jewish communal life, has now in some ways been taken over by the current disruption. I'm going to start. There's so much.
Rabbi,
Yes, please.
I'm not at all surprised. I mean, my alma mater when I was there was 40% Jewish. It's now 16 and taken over. NYU has what? The most Jewish students of any university in the country. They've had it there. It doesn't matter. The effort was made and they've succeeded in infiltrating virtually everywhere in the country.
The difference, just being from my perspective, Stephen, not to go into it, is that the new school has a history, a specific and unique history of being open and embracing and very important to the Jewish world. That's all. I mean, the
And I'm
others,
saying there are others that do as well.
well,
Not
not like
unique.
new school. I'm afraid not like new school. Okay, in any event, the pro-Palestinian encampments seem to be diminishing now, and all that's left is to figure out which universities screwed up the most. I don't know if there's any discussion about which university succeeded the most, but which one screwed up the least. So there are agreements, and who knows what the agreements mean. And people are furious that some agreements seem to yield to all of the protesters' demands, and other agreements pretty much said, you guys go away and then we'll talk with you. So that's a kind of an agreement. The biggest thing going are all the agreements that the university seems to have been making with divestment from Israel. That seems to be something which the university negotiators were able to handle a little bit. One of the reasons may be that the universities actually don't handle their own investments, and their investments handled in a totally separate structure. I don't know. Members of the Harvard Jewish Alumni Alliance severely criticized Harvard for capitulation. On the other hand, some universities have gone all out with police enforcement. Some universities are being sued now by students who believe that the way the university handled the protests, the students have been cheated out of that which they paid for in their tuition. And so these will go on. They will go on. There's no result. The biggest, I don't know, nothing unusual to say about all of this, except to say that people are now trying to figure out who were the winners, who were the losers in these protests. And so let's just pause a moment, really just a moment, not for speeches, but for comments. Who were the winners, who were the losers in these student protests, pro-Palestine? Any thoughts? Brief comments. Steve, brief comment.
3 brief comments. One, Hamas and the anti-Israel people are winners. I think Cornell did better than many universities. They didn't have to bring in the police or arrest anybody.
Okay, short comments next.
My third final point is some states, at least Pennsylvania, if you receive any state funding, BDS is illegal. So at least my alma mater cannot accede to that demand.
Okay, super. Any other reactions. There's no right, there's no wrong. But how do you feel now that we're moving out of it? Who were the winners? Who were the losers? How do you feel?
That's not my question. My question is who supported the Palestinians? Did the money come from where
Okay,
to
there is sufficient evidence to indicate that far left Jewish organizations and far left rich progressive Jews supported a number of the pro-Palestinian activities. In other words, some of the major supporters of the pro-Palestinian events were progressives on the far left and Jewish progressives on the far left. Soros is the name most frequently given, but there are many others, and they're non-Jewish ones as well, progressive, that would include the Rockefeller Brothers Foundation, and there are a whole bunch of others. But one thing is clear, and I know that coming out of this group, we know this was not spontaneous. At least we have to walk away with that. It was not spontaneous. It was planned several months in advance. It was organized nationwide so that what the students were demanding became the same in almost every setting. That much we know. That much we know. One of the surprise events happened at Duke. By the way, anyone else want to come and talk about who were the winners, who were the losers in your own minds, how you feel about it? I'm just curious. Okay, Herb.
Clearly, the winners were the demonstrators and the Hamas and the Palestinians. The losers were the universities.
I'm sorry. So who were the winners? Who were the losers?
The winners was Hamas and the student protesters.
They won.
They won, and the college universities lost.
Okay. Any other Ray? Okay.
Thank you. I agree with Herb that the universities, by and large, were losers with their varying degrees of response. I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But most conspicuously and most heartbreakingly, Israel was a huge loser, because I am terrified that the footprint of the message and the traction that it had, particularly in the minds of up and coming younger people who never knew a different Israel, is changing Israel's understood nature in the world in a way that right now I don't know how Israel is going to recover from. So I believe Israel is the worst of all the losers at this time.
Thank you. Perceptive. Okay. Anyone else before we move on? Anyone else? Okay. Duke University awarded an honorary doctorate to one of the great American entertainers, Jerry Seinfeld. The name may mean something to you. Seinfeld. When Duke University's president introduced Seinfeld as the commencement speaker, there was loud booing, and dozens of Duke graduates carrying Palestinian flags walked out of the graduation. What's interesting to me is Jerry Seinfeld, who has been famous for what's it all about? Nothing. It's about nothing, and that was his shtick for years and years and years, and it was fabulous. Decided to put down a stake in the ground and became an outspoken advocate for Israel in this series of events. And he was singled out, and people are aware that Jerry Seinfeld is no longer neutral on issues confronting the United States. So that's kind of a coming home. Israel is 76 years old. Another way to put it is the Nakba, the catastrophe, began 76 years ago. We use the same number to refer to a very different circumstance. Israel's Yom HaAtzmaut celebrations were at best muted. Many families demanded in their, because the local municipalities, the towns, the cities had their own events, as well as the big event on Mount Herzl and all that. They didn't want fireworks because they had too many people believe this, living in the community with PTSD. And so they cut out the fireworks so that these people wouldn't be driven in pain. Got to think about that. There was a ceremony, always is, for the kindling of candles by 12 individuals who are considered to be having made great contributions to the well-being of Israel. And it's been nice. I mean, they single out every year some very, very worthwhile people. There was something new added this year called the torch dousing ceremony. They had ceremonies in a number of Israeli towns in which there were 12 major flames kindled the way they're kindled in the national observance. But each one of those candles was designated to reflect an aspect of the catastrophe that began October 7th. And so instead of kindling candles, they had candle torch, if you will, dousing ceremonies. I can't comment on that. I think somebody made some clever thinking and found a new way to express pain. There were movements all over Israel to cancel Yom HaAtzmaut celebrations after 76 years, saying that we have nothing to celebrate, so what's the celebration? And that was not accepted, but believe me, the pressure was on in a lot of places. 100,000 people again gathered that weekend to protest the Netanyahu government. The theme for the protesters is hope is not lost. You will remember the Israeli national anthem, Od lo avda tikvatenu. Our hope is not lost. And these ceremonies dramatically emphasize the fact that hope is still possible. It was the kind of an Independence weekend in which the prime minister canceled out of a number of observances. His speaking very limited. The people just weren't in the mood. I can't comment beyond that. They just weren't in the mood. Next. You know the number of Palestinians killed since October 7th. People at this point have been rounding up to maybe 40,000, 40,000. And then there are debates. How many were women, non-combatants? How many were children? And so forth. What I'm going to say next sounds so untrue to me that I'm offering it with great hesitation. The United Nations, the Commission for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, said that the number of 34,000 murdered Palestinians is incorrect. The number that the United Nations is now asserting is not 34,000, but 24,000. Now, please, 24,000 is 24,000. It is not inconsequential. But the numbers that are being thrown around the world, imitating the results published by the Hamas news agencies, are now demonstrably false. The number is still high. How many children have to be murdered, killed before it's a catastrophe? Maybe one. But they are saying that Hamas peddled numbers which the world swallowed. And now the United Nations has indicated that those numbers are false. Any reflections before we move on? I didn't believe it. I read it. I reread it. I checked my sources, and the sources keep on repeating.
Excuse me.
Please.
This is Helen.
Yes.
How can we make it so that the media will correct those numbers that Hamas is saying? What can we, the lay people, do? It's the media that is continuing with these stories.
We live in Los Angeles, Helen. To make life simple, one of the easy things that a citizen of Los Angeles can do is write a letter to the editor of the Los Angeles, Times, right? Whatever it is, Times. And first check your numbers, check what I've said, because now it's not hidden. It's out there. And then in your letter, offering due regret and pain for the loss of anyone, can at least correct in the paper what Hamas has been claiming. That you can do. Right? That's not very political. That's simple. Most people, of course, won't read the correction because they have the original, and you know how people are. That's where they stop. Next. Folks, no one knows what's going to happen in Rafah. Israel has started tank ground troop invasions of this last segment of the Gaza Strip. What's going to happen with this? Will it become big, full-scale invasion? Or will it be satisfied with smaller undertakings? We don't know. What I find so desperately amusing that Hamas, which had refused to accept proposals for a ceasefire until now, are now saying, because Israel is now moving into Rafah, that they cannot accept the ceasefire. But they already rejected it over and over again. And then, of course, what happens is the happy, innocent folks who read the headline, Palestinians will, or Hamas, walk away from the negotiating table because of Israel's invasion of Rafah. And if this were not a family-sponsored program, I would offer a word or two indicating my attitude about this statement. It is less than true. It is a distortion. It won't stop your neighbors from saying, well, because Israel went into Rafah, that Hamas, of course, won't negotiate with them. It has nothing to do with the reality. Tens of thousands of Palestinians have already fled Rafah for refuge in central Gaza. They will never forget 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years. They will never forget having been displaced from their homes in northern Gaza, for example, or in Khan Yunis in southern Gaza, or in Rafah. They will never get over having to flee another Israeli invasion. Even though, in my mind, it's very justified. The Palestinians will use this as a permanent marker of the cruelty and insensitivity of Israel. Tens of thousands. What do you do about that? People, I was just on the phone this morning, very bright, informed Jewish type person. And he is embarrassed, angry, frustrated by all that Israel has done wrong to prolong this war. And the fact of the matter is that you can't ask that question because no single entity is going to bear the full responsibility for all that happened. The Israelis are negotiating for a future relationship with Saudi Arabia. Many liberal Jews are furious. Do you remember the slaughter and the carving up of what Khashoggi, the guy in Turkey, right? In Turkey, who was carved up into little pieces. And basically the crown prince of Saudi Arabia basically said, yeah, we did that. How can Israel negotiate with murderers? I'm open to comment here. How does Israel negotiate with murderers? How does Israel negotiate with a country, the ruler of which sent assassins into a foreign country to kidnap, murder, and chop into pieces a journalist who was also an American citizen? How does that happen, Steve?
The only thing I could say is while it's wrong, countries exist, have an impact on the world economy and on Americans, and isolating yourself from talking to them doesn't really benefit anyone. And the stronger the relationship you have, the more you hopefully can have some influence to help them improve their conduct. But ignoring them doesn't do anyone any good.
I'm sorry?
I said ignoring them doesn't help anyone.
Ray.
Thank you. I agree with Steve's observation, both that it's probably not right to negotiate with them, but that pragmatism is certainly driving it. But I'll also add to it, I think, quite possibly, speculating, a piece of the pragmatism might be that we in America capitulated first, and Biden reversed himself, unfortunately, and became more amenable. I don't remember the details, but many months or perhaps a year or two ago, to negotiating with Saudi Arabia as well, and appearing to let bygones be bygones by not talking about them. So if Israel is invested in continued loyalty from us in America, perhaps they were waiting for such a cue and are now saying, well, if Biden does it, it's okay for us to do it too, or maybe even trying in some way to stay in our good graces as far as they can. It's possible.
Thank you. Let me just put a question out there. You know that we don't judge anybody. I judge, but you folks are better than I am. We don't judge anybody. How do you think Biden's presidential chances have been impacted by what's going on in the Middle East? Do you feel that Biden has been helped, hurt, or whatever in terms of his electoral possibilities through the manner in which he has conducted foreign policy in the Middle East? I'd love to hear your responses. Steve, I want to wait. I want to get some other people up
Okay.
and provide empty space to let them have a chance. What about that? How do you feel? Okay, please. Okay, I see Sylvia. Thank you.
I think it's like 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. Some people are angry for his unwavering support of Israel. Some people are angry for not doing more to protect the however many Palestinians have been killed. I'm not really thinking it's going to be a major impact because people, for whatever reason, are more focused on other things that bother them, like inflation or lies being told by various and sundry candidates. I mean, in my own mind, it's not going to, I admire his ability to do what he thinks is right. I don't always agree with it. In this case, I'm not 100% sure I agree with what he's been doing, but he's not doing it except that he thinks it's the right thing to do. And that to me makes him a far better president than someone who has no spine.
Okay, and you know, we're going to have to deal with the reality that sometimes our noblest intentions turn out to have results we didn't expect. And that is simply true. What else, folks? Will you be influenced in the way you cast your ballot because of what's going on today? Joanne?
Yeah, no, I think Biden's getting killed by what's going on in Gaza, and it needs to be stopped or fixed, or there needs to be something done, because I think this is killing him politically.
Where does that leave you on election day?
Oh, I support him 100%.
You support Biden 100%.
Absolutely, but I think like the college kids and all these people that are marching around saying what he's doing and our support of Israel is wrong, I think that's going to kill him in the end, unless something happens.
But do you think those same people will vote for Trump?
I have no idea what they'll do. Hopefully they'll vote for Biden when they consider what Trump will do, but at this point, I don't know.
Yeah, the non-voters this time could have enormous. I am curious, of course, as to how the people out there watching parts of the trial how many, if any of them, changed their minds about the suitability of Donald Trump to be their president. Do the undecideds right now, are they more likely to say, what, Steve?
I have a number of things. First of all, I'm very disappointed because I think for the first time ever, Biden is acting politically and it's killing him, because trying to appeal to these protesters, they're never going to come around. He's going to lose Jewish votes. I mean, I will vote for Biden if Trump's running. If they come up with someone else, I'm not so sure, because I think he's getting very bad political advice, and he's going to lose a lot of votes. And as for the trial, I think it's very sad that we don't get to see the trial, because I listen to these people pontificate, and I happen, with my background, a lot of this speculation and how people are interpreting it and everything else is so far-fetched. These people want to sound so impressive that I don't think the public is actually getting a very good read on the trial, and it would be much better if you heard their interpretations, if you could have actually seen what was going on in the courtroom.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of weird. I don't know why the federal courts have this no television thing. I'm sure they had a reason 20 years ago for doing it, but boy, it is frustrating. Oh, you should see Trump's face. He's been dozing all during Michael Cohen's testimony. I would have rather seen him doze than to hear about it, but that's okay. Okay, Steve, anything else or moving on?
I could say a lot, but I'll let other people speak.
Okay, great. Anyone else? Howard, you're being atypically quiet today. What's wrong?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really have a lot to say. I'm sorry.
What are you thinking? Come on, man. Trust us. The worst that we can do.
I'm thinking that Biden is already cooked and he's going to lose the election, clearly, unless something changes. and this horrible stuff that's happening with regard to BDS becoming mainstream, it's just going to hurt him more, but it's just another nail in the coffin.
So you're figuring that this is really another nail in the coffin of Biden's campaign.
Yep.
I'm really sorry I called upon you. Okay? So
Sorry.
we can forget that comment.
Sorry.
Okay, Risa.
You know where I stand with all of this watching of the trial.
I can tell people that you scream frequently, I can't stand it anymore, but forget that that's a personal comment.
Right, I really can't. It's first of all, I don't like being treated as if I were a member of the jury, and I don't like hearing every time they talk, they're saying, I think, I don't care what you think. I want to know what's actually happening if I'm going to be told that. So I'm not watching the so-called trial by commentators. And none of this can be good for Biden. But the fact that he is trying to tell Israel what to do is very upsetting. And Rafah is very upsetting, everything that's going on with Rafah. And my feeling about the election is that people who are anti-Trump are also anti-Biden. And I think that the Biden people are not going to show up at the polls because they don't know what to do, and they certainly are not going to vote for Trump. So I think the whole thing is affecting the election. And it's very, very sad for me.
Leaves a big opening for Kennedy.
Oh, I don't think so. I don't think people
No, I'm getting vigorous head shakes. No, never, never.
I don't think they're going to vote for him. And it makes me sick as a Bostonian that he's dragging the name through the mud.
Yeah, there should be a way for Bostonians to file some sort of copyright infringement against his stealing the Kennedy name to run for election. But actually, they can't do that, Risa.
I know, but it's not the way it should be.
Right. Okay. All right. That's great. Anyone else want to contribute a thought before we move on? Stick up your hands if you think Trump will win, based on today, not you don't know what the future is. Stick up your hand if you think, as of today, that Trump is likely to win. 1, 2, 3, 4 people. How many of you think Biden is likely to win? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So by this very scientific measure, Biden wins 60-40. I mean, that's a pretty big thing, right? So I don't know if we should allow Herb and Sylvia to cast 2 separate votes, but
by a hair. I am very, very nervous, and I guess I'm voting my hope more than I'm voting a realistic take on what's going on out there.
Okay. Marilyn, by the way, I haven't said hello to you, and it's good to see you. And hello, Marilyn. Hi. Now, with all this going on, don't get tense, but here comes a question. What occupied the headlines of Israel for the past week? With Rafah going on, with the American stuff, with the withholding of arms, with X, Y, Z, what was the top headline in Israel all this week? I see 2 hands. Okay, I'm going to call on both of you one at a time. Go ahead, Steve, then Risa. Steve? Are you answering or you're just waving at me?
I'm answering. Bibi laying tefillin.
Bibi what?
put on tefillin in public. First time that's been seen forever.
Okay. Thank you. Beep. Thank you for playing. Risa,
I think wanting BB out.
wanting BB out. Risa, beep. Thank you for playing. Any other wild-eyed guesses? What were the headlines in all Israeli papers during this week? Eurovision.
Oh, of course.
Oh, of course.
No, you don't
I
get credit
forgot.
for, of course.
Mona got it.
I forgot.
You know, you don't get credit for, I knew that. No, you didn't offer it. Israelis used the Eurovision competition as a means of deflecting the huge pain and problems and concerns and upheavals. And then, after the Eurovision decision was made and the winner was announced, Eden Golan, 20-year-old Russian-Israeli singer who represented Israel in the competition, won, except for the 4 people ahead of her. She came in 5th. Now, there was a big competition. So 5th is Nishlech. That's not a small matter. She came in 5th, and it's all a matter of, it's worldwide voting, right? It isn't just a group of judges. And the next day, Israeli press trumpeted, Eden, you are #1. And they were celebrating her victory, except for the other 4 people. And
Voting, she came in second.
I think Israel was entitled to a little bit of foolishness. Coming in 5th place, and she won the 2nd highest ranking in the popular votes cast by viewers across the world. So she really did well. She did well. And in Israeli eyes, she won. I looked at some of the other acts, the competitors. This is not opera. This is not fine coloratura singing. If you remember the term grunge, this is a grunge competition. And I do not recommend that you go look and see who the winners were. But Israel won. Okay. Next.
By the way, they made her change the lyrics to her song because they reflected on October 7th too much as originally written.
I think that, Steve, in some ways, they tried to disadvantage her. But the fact of the matter is, by appearing and competing, she got a lot of support across the world. You're right. They tried
Agree 100%.
Yeah, she got a lot of support. And if you ask Israelis, what was the best thing that happened this week, they will tell you it was Eurovision. Why not? Why not? Do you know that 60,000 Israelis from the northern border are living in Jerusalem? Are you aware? 60,000 Israelis from the northern border with Lebanon have been driven out of their homes, Kiryat Shmona, but a whole bunch of towns, driven out of their homes, and they're living in hotels in Jerusalem. Not hotels with 5-star service, but they're living there. I had this conversation this morning with this very smart individual. And he was pointing out to me that Israel has created, by virtue of the war it is fighting, another generation of Palestinian radicals. That the kids who had to bury parents, grandparents, flee their home. I mean, I cannot and I do not underestimate this. The kids who suffered in this way might as well have been enrolled in a Hamas preschool to get ready to become freedom fighters in another 10 years. And while he was saying this, I was helped to understand why Israelis aren't abandoning the war. This is a bad situation. Too many have suffered too much. Which side can give up all that it has suffered and embrace a Germany-France future of friendship, Israel and the Palestinians? Who can do that? I think it's asking a lot. Risa.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's one thing to say about the Palestinian children. The Israeli children have been changed terribly by living in these hotels and by having lived through all of this. And that scares me. It goes back to Golda Meir. The worst thing about these wars is what it does to our kids and what it trains them in ways that we don't want. But I don't think we're ever going to have the, let's just say, the power of the combined Jewish Palestinian youth workers together. I don't think that's going to be a strong thing in the future.
If anyone is asking why Israel seems to be tending more and more to the political right, Risa has given the answer. These experiences, these losses, the anger, the fear, the desire for revenge, has moved the needle of Israeli politics away from what was in the 60s and the 70s strong left center, left center, to increasingly strong right center or more. The left is bleeding support because of this. And when you're trying to figure out why don't Israelis jump on board the peace train? Okay, Howard?
I'm not actually 100% sure that this is going to generate another generation of martyrs or brainwashed children. I think the dial was already at 10. They were already completely Jew-hating, brainwashed. And if you look back, the atrocities that the U.S. committed in Japan, firebombing of Tokyo, the atom bombing of Hiroshima, and then for good measure, Nagasaki. There's hardly any anti-American opinion at all in Japan. In fact, from what I've read, after after Japan was defeated, the Japanese admired the Americans. So it's possible. I don't know how possible that the same kind of thing might work here if Israel actually succeeds in carrying out its proving that you can't, that armed resistance doesn't work, and these Hamas people are losers, it might happen.
Thank you. I don't know who raised their hands, whether it's Herb or Sylvia. Okay.
When I was in college for my sins, I took geology and I learned all about sedimentary rocks. And I think what's happening is there are two separate buildups of sedimentary rocks on both sides. The Palestinians are adding to their hostilities, and the Israelis are adding to theirs, and nothing is going to make them come together. They hated each other before. They hate each other more, if that's possible, now, and they will continue to hate each other as time goes on. Nobody trusts the other side. And honestly, I'm not sure they should trust the other side. And so even if they talk about an actual Palestinian state, even if they talk about stopping hostilities, I think that's going to last about 10 minutes. And then they're going to go at it again because they don't see each other as potential human beings.
Potential.
Anyone else like to contribute a thought? No, Sylvia. The answer is, of course, yes. Your perspective is very strong. I just want you to be totally wrong, but I can't say that. I would like you to be totally wrong. I can only say this. When you use the model of Japan, or when we talk about Germany, France, my miserable excursions into world history lead me to believe, though the ancient hatreds are no longer visible, they still do exist. And they still do exist. Okay, we just have to, how many of you are in favor of Biden's cutting certain forms of military support for Israel right now? Cutting back the shipment of the 2,000-pound bombs and the other things. You think that's a good idea? I have 2 votes yes. Do I have anybody who says no, that it was not a good idea? Joanne, do you want to tell me why? Why you think it was not a good idea?
No, I just,
That's
I
okay.
just, I just don't think it was a good idea. I think he's kind of indicating he's being wishy-washy. He should just take a stand and stick with it.
Steve?
First of all, I think Biden has no business telling Israel how to conduct the war. They have more knowledge and information than we do. How Blinken go out there and say he has a better plan for Rafah. Well, if he does, why doesn't he give it to Israel? They'd love to have it. This notion of withholding information about Hamas leaders to kind of extort something is wrong. We should just be giving them intelligence. And at this point, Israel's existence is questionable, and we just need to give them absolutely everything they need, and they're in the best position to know what that is.
How many of you know the name Miriam Adelson? Adelson, Adelson. Billionaire, your average run-of-the-mill local billionaire, and one of the Republican Party's, with her late husband, strongest funders and supporters, owners of Israel Hayom, a very right-wing or right-leaning popular daily. The Adelsons did something which was absolutely wrong. They bought an entire newspaper chain, Yisrael Hayom, and then they began distributing it free. That is so wrong. All the other newspapers went wild. And Israel Hayom, which didn't exist on the radar, is now one of Israel's most widely circulated newspapers. Very bad. In any event, Adelson Miriam had this to say at the top of a recent front page of Yisrael Hayom. People forget that, what's the wording? Hamas is the one that attacked, semicolon. United States delaying weapons shipments. Okay, I guess they kind of communicated their feeling about that. That didn't go over very, very well. And then the debate in Israel today is Biden truly a friend of Israel, or is he a Hamas apologist? Hamas apologist.
That's off.
And Israelis don't know what to make of Biden. I have in the past worked as a counselor, but then didn't stick with people who were bipolar. And I have met and people sat with me, bipolar people, and sometimes depending upon the level of medication and the status of their equilibrium, they were this way or that way. That's what bipolar sometimes involves. People are trying to figure out, is Biden today truly a friend of Israel? Is Biden today truly more interested in his own election? Is Biden today increasingly sympathetic with the forces that may be controlling the world, including Iran, China, Russia, and so forth? And people in Israel don't know who Biden is. And I will tell you quietly, I'm not so sure myself today. I'm not so sure. I know all of his history. Steve, we got to finish. Okay, Steve.
I was going to say, I believe Biden personally is pro-Israel, and he's in a bind because he's being political and he's being misguided with some very poor political advice, and it's very unfortunate.
In the elections coming up and coming forward, there is a representative, Jamal Bowman, who's part of the squad, who has accused Israel of an onslaught against innocent civilians. And totally anti-Israel position. What we have to be wary about, and with this I close, even though there's a lot of stuff here. We got to really know what our senators and representatives think about this issue. And I will tell you that they will often try to avoid the conversation. Don't let them. Whatever it is you feel you want in a leader, make sure that the person for whom you are voting is clear on that issue. Then you'll make a decision. But I will tell you that they're not going to be interested in being open. Hi, everybody. I can't promise better news next week, but maybe the sun will come up eventually. Eventually. Have a beautiful, beautiful week. Enjoy. Read the papers with great suspicion. Follow the trial with absolute uncertainty and worry about Israel and the United States. They are both in serious jeopardy.
Thank you. Have a good week. See you
Have a
this
good
weekend.
week. Thank you.
See you this weekend.
Thank you.
Yeah, this weekend, indeed, yes.
Be well.
You too.
Thanks.